Yo, it's good. It's Young Honey. It's kind of rainy outside, so I'm going to read some scary stories. I hope you enjoy. If you do, drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much. When I was 15, I was doing my 4 a.m. newspaper delivery round on a bicycle. I was driving into the garden of this one subscriber when I saw two guys with flashlights looking through the window of the house. I was a bit in shock and said, "Good morning, guys." They were just as much in shock, and an awkward silence followed. I fucking bet. I tried to break the silence by asking if I could pass them to deliver the newspaper through the door. One of the guys said the person living in that house did something to his family, and they took it as an opportunity to get away in their car that was still running. When they were gone, I rang the doorbell at the house to tell them what happened, and they should keep an eye out. I want to know what the person who owns that house did to someone else to deserve that. I also want to know why the person trying to break in thought that was an adequate excuse. It worked. But I don't know why that worked. That person's a fucking menace. My mom used to live in a small town in the Cascade Mountains and worked as a forest ranger. Creepiest thing that happened was the oldest male ranger kept hitting on her and trying to get her to come home with him. Not very out of the ordinary, but many years later, after she left the town, she found out that he had been convicted of manslaughter and killed a young female ranger right before she got hired. She probably would have been his next target. Holy fuck. I ain't like that. We moving on. Some friends and I were fishing in a small pond just after dark for catfish. We started to hear sounds coming off the water like someone was throwing softball-sized rocks, but they were coming from all over the pond. We figured someone was just messing with us, and we called out a few times for them to stop, but we eventually got freaked out and left. Cut to a few years later, I'm fishing a different pond and hear the same sound. Turns out it's a beaver slapping its tail on the water to drive me from its territory. When beavers became problems in rivers, they relocate them to ponds and towns. Yo, if I ever saw a beaver while fishing, I would lose my fucking shit. Once again, though, I live in Florida. I don't think I'm supposed to see beavers while I'm fishing. I've been fishing out in the Gulf of Mexico where they have some oil rigs. This rig wasn't being used from what we knew, so we got pretty close to it to fish for red snapper. While we were out there, we could have sworn we heard screams of a woman over and over again. It was some shit, but the explanation was the wind making the noise as it blew through the rig. Well, that's what we were told, but it totally creeped us the fuck out. I'm not gonna lie, I want to say that that's a totally reasonable and rational explanation, but I if that was me, I wouldn't mentally accept that. I work as a polar bear guard, as in I escort people across tundra and mountains and protect them from polar bears. I once saw a snowman totem with reindeer antlers coming out of its head. It was deformed, full of bullet holes, and rather creepy. First of all, I work as a polar bear guard is the hardest fucking job description I've heard in my life. Second of all, you torch that snowman. That's all you do. You torch it and you walk away. It's really clear, so everyone can plainly see all the tuna and barracuda hanging around the rig, waiting for the onboard cook to throw whatever food waste he needs to. Every once in a while, there would be a great white that would swim up from underneath and snatch a tuna, and it really took less than a second. That's really scary. I agree. I worked for a guy that spearfished underneath the rigs out in the Gulf. That's a dog. He said it was perfect. Since there were tons of fish underneath and the sharks would never go between the legs, just wait for the fish to leave. Plus, the view was amazing looking down and seeing nothing but abyss. He loved it. I can only imagine how scared I would be. Yeah, I would, that's a different kind of person doing that job. That's what that is. I've worked in Canada's north for a few years now in oil and gas. It's pretty creepy when during night shift you realize a moose has just been standing at the tree line, staring you down for an unknown length of time, or finding bear tracks crossing the tracks you just made about 5 minutes ago. Honestly, the silence of a snowy forest in the dead of night 100 kilometers away from anything is pretty spooky. When your only contact to the outside world is a radio channel nobody's listening to, you feel pretty alone. I bet you probably end up just on Reddit reading people's threads and shit. I was the creepy occurrence. I live on a ranch off a quiet dirt road. Our distant neighbors, nearest house is about a mile away as the crow flies, have had issues with people stealing things out of their outbuildings and storage sheds in the area. It was also late in the year, so it was starting to get dark around 6 p.m. So as a result, every time I would see headlights go down our road, I would watch to make sure they weren't stopping on our property. One evening, I see a vehicle going super slowly down the road and come to a stop at the end of our driveway about 120 yards from our front porch. The vehicle is parked right in front of a 60s pickup I have parked, so I think whoever it is might be looking to steal it or looking over the property. Whatever the case, I decided to put on a black coat and grab my rifle to investigate. It's dark out, so I stay out of the headlights of the vehicle so I can get close. I can tell that this is a white van, but I don't see anything else distinguishing about the van. When I'm about 50 yards away, the van backs up and turns into our driveway. I freeze as the headlights wash over me standing in the middle of my driveway, and I see the reflective FedEx logos on the side of the van. Needless to say, the FedEx driver probably shat his pants as he suddenly sees a dark figure standing in the middle of a field, in the dark, holding a rifle. Surprisingly, after I try to give a friendly wave and smile, he continues up the driveway to the house. I get to explain the situation, we both have a laugh. So that's how I got to be the creepy guy in some FedEx delivery driver's story. Working on ships, there was one night I was on a ship sailing through Alaskan waters. Happened to be my first night ever seeing northern lights. I can't believe how awesome that was. It made the sky clear, made the night look like it was dusk. We were able to see clearly for miles. A few buddies and I hit the roof of what we call Lido Deck at 1 a.m. just to gaze at it. An hour or so in, there are 6 of us on top, nearly the entire crew now. Big white spotlight shines at us. We were near land, but where the spotlight was above the water, and it wasn't low enough to be on a ship. This was very high up. Shined on us for about 15-20 seconds. Once the light turned off, we looked to see what it was. Saw nothing. No trace of an aircraft or anything. A couple minutes go by and the same light shined on us. This time it was from the other side of our vessel above mountains. Still unable to see what it was, we all saw it. We have never been able to see any aircrafts hovering above those waters, especially at 2 in the morning. We don't know what it was. We think it may have been some sort of silenced aircraft. The military was probably doing drills or something. But anyways, that was one of the weirder things to happen out on the water. I was serving as a fireman for my nation's compulsory national service. Once, we were called into a forest to retrieve a body who was found hanging on a noose deep along one of the running trails. He had apparently committed suicide by hanging himself off a tree, was found by a few morning joggers. What's creepy was we found a stray doll at the foot of the tree. It was stabbed with a few red bobby pins in the head facial area, and there was an unknown talisman that was half burnt where the doll was sitting. When we took the body down, we had to carry him a few kilometers out of the forest, and halfway along the journey, a previously unknown wound on his face, unnoticed, on his face started bleeding. One of my men swore that it was bleeding from the same spot as where the bobby pin was stuck on the doll, but we could not confirm it as we left the doll where the body was found for the police. Passed the body on to the paramedics and booked our way out of the area. That's called a goddamn business decision. That happens to you, you get the fuck out of there. I worked in a store once in a really small town that was absolutely dead. Customer every hour or so, shifts all alone too, which sure wasn't even legal, but hey. Anyway, it's a dark evening and I'm sat on Reddit as usual when I hear the door open. I look up and see the back of a man as he begins walking down the first aisle towards the tin foods, and he appears to be talking to someone on the phone. Think nothing of it and go back to Reddit. All of a sudden, I get the intense smell of soil and earth. I look up and see a man's approaching the counter, and he's wearing some kind of overalls, and his face and long gray hair and body is just covered in dirt. That's when I notice he isn't on the phone at all, and he's just talking to himself in this absolutely bizarre tone. He sounds like a cartoon elf or something. He's just sort of muttering and doing this weird sort of hee-hee sort of laugh. I'm just stood frozen as he stood at the counter in front of me, I'm thinking I'm about to be killed when a policeman storms through the door. He asks if I'm okay, to which I don't respond because I'm just in a complete state of what the fuck is happening. Tells the man to come outside, to which he starts muttering gibberish and saying the words legal over and over again. They come and grab the man and put him in the back of the police car, and that's the last I ever heard of it. I have no idea who he was, what was going on, but I've never been so afraid of another person before. You know when you get a sense of a bad situation. So grateful the police showed up when they did. Yeah, I would be too. I don't need. I would be too. I'm gonna be honest. I don't know any of that boat terminology, like at the very start, and I keep slipping up on it. So I'm just gonna give y'all a second to read it. He described doing anything on deck at night in a storm as the most dangerous thing you could possibly do because outside of the weather and risk of going overboard, there was such high tension on various cables that if anything snapped, it might come across the deck and cut someone in half. Now, he said this particular seagoing tug had some history. One of the previous crew had gone missing before Dad's time on the crew, and from the way it wasn't discussed but occasionally alluded to, there may have been foul play. So, in the midst of the storm, with danger and tension high, an argument broke out. Two of the crew start yelling at each other, and at the moment everyone thought it would come to violence, a fire axe flew across the deck and landed at their feet. No one was near the wall where it had been strapped down. Fire axe has its own bracket welded to a wall with straps to hold it in place unless it's needed. They don't just come loose on their own, and the odds of it landing at their feet were impossible, except that the two arguing were also the ones who had fought with the lost sailor. They did not fight. They put the axe back in the rack. Everyone finished their work quietly, and it was never spoken again until they returned to shore. Holy shit.